to most of these filling stations, you ask them, oh, why are diesel prices this? Some of them answer, they're like, oh, they don't know. They're just, following the trend of other diesel players within the economy.
All right, in all of this, even though for now, most of the domestic commodity prices seem to remain unchanged, but what is the outlook like?
Well, like I mentioned, we're moving closer and closer to the Christmas season. We're still unsure of how, the commodity prices will play. They could either play in such a way that increased demand would hike prices, or we see that prices remain stable the way they are, and or producers actually produce more and match up with demand. And like on Friday, we actually saw that the price of flour actually reduced to about 10,000 naira per 50 kg bag. And what this means is that all in all, we should actually see prices of other goods follow the same. Other commodity prices follow the same trend.
By the way, before I let you go, do we expect that the global trend, the trend in the global oil price will continue the way it's going right now?
Yes, well, at this point, we've seen that U.S. production is actually reducing. It's gradually reducing. And also, we're still unsure of what the tension in Iraq is, what it's about. We have the Kurdish hub of Iraq, still, battling with the issue of trying to be independent from Iraq. So that uncertainty there is actually feeding into oil prices. But at the same time, with the way oil prices trend, we expect that this effect would actually be felt through oil prices and wouldn't affect, them as much. All in all, we do expect that oil prices will keep trading in the short term above $55 per barrel and below $60 per barrel.
All right, thank you very much, Bolande.
Thank you.
Bolande Olutosi is one of the research analysts with Financial Derivatives Company here in Nigeria. We'll move on now. The midstream and downstream petroleum business in Africa is at a developing stage that operators and policy makers want to advance. Now, the political will to realize this goal took the center stage at the OTL Africa Downstream Summit, where participants brainstormed on how Nigeria can take the bull by the horn.
The issues are, I'm a capitalist through and through, and I believe that governments should have a limitation on what it gets involved in, and government's limitation should stay strictly with setting up government policies and directions, and should allow private sector to drive it. I always find out that initially when private sector takes over something, in most cases you find out that the price goes up, but over time price begins to find its way to level because competition steps in, and thereafter things begin to happen in the right kind of way. Like you said, you're right about education. People are not getting the wrong concept about what it's all about. I feel very sad. I'm from the Niger Delta area, and I feel very sad when a young man goes and blows a pipeline and trying to hold somebody in Abuja responsible because he's not getting something to eat. He fails to realize the impact of that on his life for the next 30 to 40 years because it affects his solar system and it also affects his livelihood for a long time. So I believe that there are other ways to express your grievances. So education is very, very key because a person who is not educated will not understand the impact of the action he's taking. So these are the kind of things that we need to do. And we need to begin to pull more people in and develop the industry that we're talking about to other people to step in and be part of it. People right now feel isolated. They feel that the industry, the oil and gas industry is very complicated. It's not complicated. All you need to do is to have a good understanding and become more of a participant in it. Ghana has always been a gateway and Nigeria has been a destination. But then the gateway can suddenly become the destination. But then you must also realize that whether Ghana likes it or not, with the level of population they have, they cannot sustain what happens in the area. Yes, Nigeria, we need to up our game. Up our game in the sense that we need to begin to get things right, done properly. And I can tell you one thing for sure. One thing I've known is that the majority of the Nigerians we know around the world, Nigerians are running most of these things around the world, but we are not, because they don't have that comfort level within the government policy and the government institutions. They are refusing to come back to Nigeria to participate. So we need to begin to create the environment that draws them back into the system and do what they are doing for other countries and let them do it for Nigeria. So you're right, but whether Ghana likes it or not, they will not have the kind of level of production they have. With all due respect, I'm half Ghanaian, so I'm half of there and half of here. So I understand what they're talking about. But the bottom line is that Nigeria still continues to remain its destination, and Nigeria continues to be the biggest economy in West and Central Africa. And whether we like it or not, we cannot escape that. But we must not take that for granted. We as Nigerians cannot take that for granted because the train has left the station, and if we don't catch up with it, they're going to leave us behind. Government has no business in business. The government interferes in too many issues. Government needs to take a sidestep and go behind. Government needs to just sit back and become a tax collector or a revenue collector. But government needs to be the one in generating. Where you're having situations where within government, as a business, you're competing against government, you cannot progress. You do a business and government does the same business. The guy who sets the policy is competing against you, who is supposed to make the policy on your behalf. So naturally, what will happen is that government is running business against the private sector, who are the businesses. So guess what? It will not move. So there needs to be a clear-cut separation from governance and business. That's where it needs to be. And unfortunately, we always have this policy of government building, and government needs to begin to release whatever infrastructure it has created to the private sector to drive it, because the private sector has a better way of managing infrastructure and businesses, whether it's road, whether it's tank farms, whether it's petroleum, whether it's refinery, whether it's whatever. Government needs to step out and let the guys who know how to run the business do the business. If you look at the pricing of petroleum products in places like UK, majority of the prices is based on tax. Government makes its money on petroleum products on tax, and we're buying fuel at such a high price in the UK. It's not about the cost of the productions, whatever. Government makes its money from tax. And I can see clearly that what government is doing here, they're not taxing petroleum products. That's where, in the UK, majority of government money comes from the taxation on petroleum products. But here, we're not making that. So let the pricing be determined by market forces. But then, when it goes to that stage, let me tell you, the price of petroleum product worldwide will not change. Whether it's Platts, Plus, West Africa, or whatever, it does not change. What changes is your efficiency to manage the logistics of bringing that product from offshore into Nigerian port. That is where we're dying. It can cost you almost as much to bring a petroleum product from West Africa or from Lome or from outside Lagos into Lagos port than it costs you for bringing from Europe to West Africa.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at some of the implications of the court order to freeze accounts without BVN.